Welcome to the Sunny Podcast. It's Anya Draus from Sun for Life Info. Today's episode is especially important. We are recording it in the context of Maternal Health Awareness Day, taking place every year on January 23rd. My guest today is Jen Aliano, Executive Director of Grassroots Health. It's a non-profit public health organization dedicated to promoting optimal health worldwide through research, education, and advocacy, with a primary focus on vitamin D. Jen's team works with leading vitamin D scientists to put research into practice.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Jen, from your perspective at Grassroots Health, why is pregnancy such a uniquely sensitive moment for vitamin D status? Many women assume pregnancy simply uses more nutrients, but vitamin D metabolism actually changes very dramatically during this time.
Yes, and that is a very key concept to understand, but there's another key concept that I wanted to include as part of that answer, and that is what exactly is vitamin D, right? Because you hear the word vitamin and it just doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, right? It's just one of the other vitamins that we get from our food. But vitamin D is the sunshine vitamin. Most of vitamin D that we get is meant to be got from UVB exposure from sunlight. And on top of that, vitamin D is actually used in our body as a hormone, a cell signaling molecule, and it's a regulator of our genes, and it has so many different functions in our body as different molecules. So we get vitamin D mostly in the form of vitamin D3, and that vitamin D3 is converted into 25-OHD, which is then converted into what is known as the active form or the hormonal form of vitamin D, which is called calcitriol or D. And that 125, that hormonal form of vitamin D that is converted in the kidneys, the conversion is very tightly regulated based on calcium homeostasis. So it's really important to keep a very tight control of the amount of calcium in our blood. If you get too much calcium, it can be toxic and potentially fatal. So vitamin D's role throughout life is to very closely monitor and regulate that calcium level in our blood, with one exception, and that exception is pregnancy. In fact, by the time a woman has reached the end of her first trimester of pregnancy, her level of calcitriol, that active form of vitamin D in her blood, would be toxic or potentially fatal to a non-pregnant individual. And that is an indication that there is something going on during pregnancy that is really needing that extra source of vitamin D. And that is what makes pregnancy such a unique time. It's super sensitive to getting enough of that vitamin D3 from sun, from food, or from supplements mostly, as we'll talk about a little bit later on.
For listeners who may be new to Grassroots Health, could you briefly share the organization's mission and why you focus so strongly on measuring nutrient levels rather than simply recommending fixed doses?
You did such a great introduction of Grassroots Health. But again, we are a nonprofit public health research organization. We were founded in 2007 by Carol Baggerly, and she actually became interested in vitamin D due to her breast cancer experience. And she was then eventually told that she had osteoporosis and she should take vitamin D. So Carol, being Carol, went down her little research rabbit hole and found the connection between vitamin D and breast cancer, and started to be put in touch with different researchers, and found Dr. Cedric Garland here at the University of California in San Diego, who had been already researching vitamin D and cancer for a few decades. And so Carol ended up attending a vitamin D workshop, and it was put on by researchers around the world, vitamin D researchers. And at the end of presenting all of these great research studies showing all the health benefits of vitamin D, they concluded with, "We need more research." And Carol is known for her famous moment in time where she stood up and said, "Where is your sense of urgency?" She actually, in collaboration with 40 senior vitamin D researchers from around the world, she formed Grassroots Health, and Grassroots Health became the organization to move research into practice. So really became the organization to disseminate the information that these researchers had been finding on vitamin D and cancer, vitamin D and prenatal outcomes, all these other health benefits that had not been getting out into the public health space. And one of the key components that we started with at Grassroots Health was a call to action. And it was signed by each of the scientists, and now it's also signed by, I think we've got over 50 international vitamin D scientists and experts who agree in two key points. The first key point being that the accurate measurement of vitamin D status is not the intake, it is the vitamin D serum level, measured as the 25 OHD level in the blood. And the second key point is that 40 to 60 nanograms per milliliter, or so I'm in the United States, nanograms per milliliter is our unit of measure here. There are a lot of countries in Europe especially that go by nanomoles per liter. So that 40 to 60 nanograms per milliliter would be 100 to 150 nanomoles per liter. And that, the scientists determined, was the optimal target range for general health. Because vitamin D deficiency is the number one nutrient deficiency in the world. Addressing vitamin D deficiency could be considered the lowest hanging fruit with the greatest health potential, meaning it is incredibly easy, inexpensive, and safe to implement. And yet it's not being done. And so that is why Grassroots Health is here, to move the current research into practice and eliminate vitamin D deficiency.
And I also love your idea of test, not guess.
Because there is another very important misconception that you can very easily get all the vitamin D that you need from the sun, just exposing your face and hands for 15 minutes a day, which is false. You can't easily get enough vitamin D from food because there's not a lot of foods that have a lot of vitamin D. You'd have to drink a whole lot of vitamin D fortified milk to get enough vitamin D. And on top of that, everybody responds differently to their dose of vitamin D. Grassroots Health has been running a study for the past several years, and we've measured a lot of different vitamin D levels. In fact, we've had over 20,000 individuals participate from around the world. And I like to use an example of how everybody responds differently based on a husband and wife in our study. And the target range for most people is between that 40 and 60 range. And to get there, the wife only needs to take 2,000 IU of vitamin D a day, but her husband, who also has type 2 diabetes, needs to take 10,000 IU a day to be within that range. And there's several reasons why that there's that big difference in dose response. And it has to do with everything from your gut health, if you digest well, to your genetics, to medications that you take. For example, certain medications like proton pump inhibitors and antibiotics, even herbs like St. John's wort have been shown to negatively influence the vitamin D level or that vitamin D dose response. So there's many reasons why. Oh, and then also weight, obesity. Those who have a higher weight or have a higher body mass index also need more vitamin D. And so that's why it's so important to measure your vitamin D level and then dose based on what your level currently is. So Grassroots Health has an online calculator that you can use, and you enter your weight, and then you enter your current vitamin D level, and you enter your target level, and it will do a calculation based on those factors to give you an estimated amount of vitamin D that will get you to your target. And then retesting is also important because everybody responds so differently. You want to make sure that that dose that you're taking is the correct dose for you. And then there's also a misconception by a lot of people. They think once they reach their level, at their target level of vitamin D, that they can stop taking it on a daily basis, and that's incorrect. You want to continue taking that dose of vitamin D that has gotten you to your target level. You want to keep taking that dose on a daily basis.
So it seems personalization is the key here. So it's all about
Yes.
more personal and precise approach. And the data show that most women enter pregnancy already deficient in vitamin D. Why is this still happening in modern societies despite increased awareness around prenatal care?
Right. And that's true. So here in the United States, about 90% of the US population is below that recommended level of 40 to 60. And about 25% of the population is below the cutoff that has been defined for bone health, which is 20, and that can be argued as well. But so many institutions set their level of deficiency at 20 nanograms per milliliter, yet about 25% of the US adult population is below that level. And the reason is because the guidelines that were created back in 2011 by the Institute of Medicine, they were based on bone health alone, not based on all the other benefits that vitamin D can provide for our health. And even for bone health, those recommendations are still too low. And I can tell you a few examples. So the vitamin D deficiency disease is rickets. Rickets is just like how scurvy is the vitamin C deficiency disease that should be completely eradicated based on current guidelines and the minimal recommended intake for these nutrients. So rickets is a problem that we are still seeing worldwide. In fact, I have been speaking with a couple in the UK whose baby was having ricketile seizures, and they didn't even measure the vitamin D level until after 4 or 5 seizures, and the baby was 10 months old, and they finally discovered that his vitamin D level was virtually non-existent. And usually rickets shows as multiple fractures all over the infant's body. And really, it's an unfortunate ordeal because these babies, rickets becomes misdiagnosed as child abuse. And when really it is just a severe vitamin D deficiency. So rickets should no longer exist. Our medical institution should be recommending and ensuring a vitamin D intake for everybody that would result in the complete elimination of rickets. And yet that is not currently the case, unfortunately. And another reason that this is happening is because of that misconception that you can get enough vitamin D from sun exposure, you can get enough vitamin D from food, but I already explained that no, it's really hard, especially with our lifestyle these days. There was a study that was done among East African populations that were still living a nomad lifestyle, exposing their skin to sunlight midday, which is when the UVB rays are available to make vitamin D. And keep in mind, these populations are around the equator, and so they've got UVB rays available year-round, whereas countries such as the UK, Canada, northern United States, they have what's called a vitamin D winter. And that means that there are certain months throughout the year that UVB rays are not available, and you can't make any vitamin D from sunlight. And then that on top of we create our own vitamin D winters by staying indoors and by putting on sunscreen all the time, covering up because of a fear of the sun. So we are not making enough vitamin D from sun exposure. Looking back at this study that was done among the East African populations, what they found was that their vitamin D levels were naturally in that 40 to 60 range. And one of my favorite points that was found from this study was that pregnant women, when they were pregnant, their levels naturally rose. They had the highest vitamin D levels compared to all the others within their groups. And so that's another example of why vitamin D is so important during pregnancy, yet Most women aren't getting enough vitamin D. Our prenatal vitamins don't have enough vitamin D, and that is why vitamin D deficiency remains so common among everybody, not just pregnant women. In fact, we did a study out of the Medical University of South Carolina, and we found that 89% of the women were below that 40 nanograms per milliliter minimum. And for looking at the levels among Black women, 99%. So virtually all of them were below that 40 nanograms per milliliter. And that's because the melanin in the skin that makes it darker also acts as a natural sunscreen, and it blocks vitamin D production, so that the darker the skin, the longer you need to be in the sun to make vitamin D. So there's, so many different factors that play into why we're seeing this issue, but it all comes down to a lack of awareness and a lack of testing and just recommendations that are too low for our overall health.
There are studies showing reductions of over 60% in preterm birth risk thanks to adequate vitamin D levels. Why do you think vitamin D has such a broad protective effect during pregnancy?
One of our studies, the one out of the Medical University of South Carolina, is one of those studies that showed that just getting vitamin D levels to 40 or higher during pregnancy reduced the risk of preterm birth by 62% compared to women whose vitamin D levels remained at 20 or lower. So it is a big deal. That was not the only study that showed that kind of benefit. And there are many other benefits that have found by getting vitamin D levels up to at least that 40. And it has an effect on multiple health outcomes during the pregnancy, not just preterm birth, but also preeclampsia, postpartum hemorrhage, gestational diabetes, postpartum depression. And then it also has health effects on the baby, from everything from low birth weight to respiratory tract infections, asthma, even IQ later on in childhood. But I also wanted to kind of mention vitamin D is important for fertility and conception as well. It's important for before pregnancy. There's been plenty of studies to show that vitamin D has a beneficial effect on conception and time to conception, on reducing the risk of miscarriage, and then also on conditions such as PCOS and all of that. And so why does vitamin D have such a broad protective effect on pregnancy? Well, vitamin D acts directly on the genes, is a regulator of our immune system. So one of the hypotheses about why vitamin D is so important during pregnancy is that it helps to protect the pregnancy itself, so that the mom, her immune system doesn't attack the baby as a foreign invader. It also helps to stimulate cellular differentiation. And I mean, it's got so many different actions within the body that could be why vitamin D is so important. But there's also a lot of unanswered questions. Again, you have to look at the physiology of vitamin D to just, it makes sense when you look at all the different things vitamin D does in the body. But I think that this is an area that there's still a lot of research that needs to be done.
Some listeners may be surprised to hear links with different diseases in child's life, asthma, also autoimmune disease, or even cancer later in life. How strong is the evidence here?
Right. When we talk about how strong is the evidence, and this is where, if you think about it, if you're looking at an outcome such as vitamin D levels during pregnancy, how do they affect your risk of breast cancer as, for that baby as an adult? That randomized controlled trial would probably be virtually impossible to conduct, and it would cost billions of dollars. And so, this whole strength of evidence, there's an unfortunate belief among the medical community that you can't make conclusions unless you've got those randomized controlled trials. And what we have for vitamin D what I like to refer to as the totality of evidence. You're looking at the basic science of vitamin D. You're looking at the clinical experiences, the observational studies, and the meta-analyses that look at all of this data to come to these conclusions. And we even have something that's called the Barker hypothesis, which is also known as the fetal origins hypothesis. And this was something that has been put out there for several years now. And it's showing how you're looking at the month of the year, right? So if you think about vitamin D and sun exposure, your vitamin D levels naturally peak at summertime. At the end of summer is when vitamin D levels are highest. And then at the end of winter is when vitamin D levels are lowest. And you can observe when you're looking at certain diseases such as multiple sclerosis, you can see that there is a link between when a woman was pregnant with her baby, if that majority of pregnancy was during the winter time and coming out of winter, then you're going to see a higher risk of some diseases for that baby, including multiple sclerosis, type 1 diabetes, and other diseases. So that is one type of evidence. It's an observation that, it's really hard to prove that. But then we also have a lot of other studies, from how vitamin D actually physically affects the pregnancy and the baby, from, programming within the fetal tissue and gene expression and that immune regulation and all of the direct actions that vitamin D has on the developing baby. And then you see how that might translate into the risk of allergies or the risk of autism or even the risk of certain diseases later in life. And so, but back to the evidence, when it comes to outcomes such as preterm birth or other diseases, there is a big study also, the VIDART study was also a randomized controlled trial. These studies did give pregnant women vitamin D. They had two groups. The intervention group received vitamin D and the control group received the minimum recommended daily amount, because you can't not give a pregnant woman vitamin D. That would be unethical in this country, at least. We'll see in some of these randomized controlled trials even that you do have an effect on asthma, preterm birth, and other outcomes during pregnancy when you look at the control group versus the intervention group, but more importantly, when you look at the achieved vitamin D level during pregnancy. And that's the important thing. When you're looking at the research, especially vitamin D, you have to know how to look at the research. You've got to make sure that, is this study measuring vitamin D levels? Because we talked earlier about how everybody responds differently to the same dose. So you want to make sure, is that dose working for them? Did they achieve that 40 nanograms per milliliter or higher? And then based on that, you can then see, well, how is that related to the outcome we're looking at? How is preterm birth related to achieving a vitamin D level of at least 40 nanograms per milliliter? And I'll give you one example. When we were working with Dr. Carol Wagner and Bruce Hollis, who had run several randomized controlled trials on vitamin D and preterm birth, when they analyzed the data just based on intake, they didn't see a statistical difference. But when we reanalyze the data based on achieved vitamin D serum level, that's when you see the 60% decreased risk of preterm birth.
Hearing more and more about omega-3s being essential during pregnancy, not only for preventing preterm birth and supporting the baby's brain, but also for the mother's mental health. How do omega-3s and vitamin D intersect when it comes to postpartum depression and emotional resilience in early motherhood?
Yeah, so omega-3s, interestingly enough, I was in practice myself about 20 years ago, and I heard about omega-3s and their importance during pregnancy before I was aware of vitamin D's importance during pregnancy. And the research on omega-3s back then was even showing omega-3 can benefit preterm birth as well. And omega-3s, our brains are made of these healthy fats. Omega-3s, DHA and EPA, are two of the main fatty acids in that omega-3 category. And our brains need omega-3s as they need vitamin D to be healthy and to develop properly. And not only do omega-3s have getting enough during pregnancy is related to a decreased risk of preterm birth and a decreased risk for low birth weight. And we're also seeing that omega-3s are related to a significantly reduced risk of postpartum depression, just as vitamin Ds are related to a reduced risk of postpartum depression. So you can't just assume that there's one answer for everything. Vitamin D is a huge piece of the puzzle, the health puzzle that's missing for a lot of people. But omega-3s, those are our fatty acids that we're supposed to get from eating a lot of fish. And a lot of people avoid fish because they don't like it, or kids don't eat a lot of fish. And interestingly, cod liver oil is one of those supplements that in our history, we gave our children cod liver oil, and cod liver oil has both omega-3s and vitamin D. And you see studies linking cod liver oil to improved immune health and improved focus and concentration, and also postpartum depression. And so, yes, it's just omega-3s are another one of those key fatty acids that our bodies need, but we're not getting enough of.
Many parents are told that breast milk is low in vitamin D and that babies must be supplemented. The Holy Study suggests that 6,400 international units per day for the mother can support both mother and baby. Why is daily intake so critical here, and what does this research change in how we think about supporting breastfeeding mothers?
Because breast milk is supposed to be the perfect food for our babies, right? And unfortunately, if we're not getting enough, if us as mothers are not getting enough of a certain nutrient, how are we supposed to pass it along to our babies? And this is where, if we're being told to take only 400 IU as a mom of vitamin D, we are not able to give our babies 400 IU of vitamin D a day. It just doesn't make sense. And it also doesn't make sense that breast milk is not the perfect food for our babies. So what's going on, right? And what's going on is that, just bottom line, our moms are not getting enough vitamin D. And the issue is so bad, right? I mentioned rickets still being an issue for some people. And in fact, in 2007 here in the United States, the American Academy of Pediatricians started recommending that all infants be supplemented with 400 IU of vitamin D at birth if they were breastfed, because they weren't getting enough vitamin D from breast milk. And so the study that you mentioned by Drs. Hollis and Wagner, what they did was they created a trial that compared two different groups. The first group, the mother was getting 400 IU of vitamin D a day, and the infant was getting 400 IU of vitamin D a day. And just to mention a side point here, keep in mind that vitamin D, the more weight you have on your body, the more your need of vitamin D. And so here we're suggesting the same daily intake of vitamin D for a mom as her tiny little baby. It doesn't make sense, right? Anyhow, so the first group was giving 400 IU of vitamin D a day to both mom and baby. The second group was only giving the mom vitamin D, but the mom was receiving 6,400 IU of vitamin D a day. So that's over 6,000 IU of vitamin D a day. And what they found was that amount given to the mom was then providing the baby with its needed 400 IU of vitamin D a day through the breast milk. And what they found at the end of the study was that in giving the mom 6,400 IU of vitamin D a day, both mom and baby ended up with sufficient vitamin D levels in the blood. So giving the mom this amount of vitamin D, you're providing those health benefits of vitamin D to both mom and baby. Whereas if you're just supplementing the baby, mom is remaining deficient. In fact, vitamin D levels plummet after birth. So if you don't supplement, that's why, the need for vitamin D actually increases a little bit. The need for that intake increases a little bit because vitamin D levels have gone down after birth. Many reasons why. Supplementing the mom is incredibly important. And you do want to give it every day, get it every day, because it's that vitamin D3, the form of vitamin D that our skin makes from the sun or that we get from supplements, that gets transferred into the breast milk. And that D3 in our blood has a very short half-life, meaning it disappears from our blood very quickly, so that if you're not getting it every day, your baby won't get it every day. So it is optimal to take it every day so that the baby has a constant supply of that D3 in the breast milk. And I would say at minimum, bare minimum, on a weekly basis. If you need to take higher doses of vitamin D once a week, that would be the bare minimum for a breastfeeding.
The way you talk about it shifts the focus back to supporting the mother at the right moment. It's very important. Grassroots Health has also published compelling research on vitamin D and breast cancer risk. Why should women think about vitamin D long after pregnancy as part of lifelong health and disease prevention?
You're correct. We have published research on vitamin D and breast cancer and other cancers. So what we've shown is a decreased risk in many cancers, especially breast and colon cancer, when you get your vitamin D level up to that 40 to 60 range. We've found an even greater decreased risk of breast cancer when you get vitamin D levels even into that 60 to 80 range. And so the higher the concern is for cancer, the higher the target level you might want to consider. But I want to make a really important point in that vitamin D should be a concern before pregnancy. So we're actually working with another nonprofit, the Helen Knoll Foundation, and they focus on vitamin D and breast cancer risk for college-age women. They're getting their awareness going, not just for vitamin D, yes, it's a central focus for them, but also on developing other healthy lifestyles that will help to decrease their risk of breast cancer starting at a younger age. And so when we're addressing vitamin D even before pregnancy, not only are you improving the health from that late teen age, you're getting all the different benefits of vitamin D because, right, vitamin D works on almost every single cell and tissue in our body. You're improving the chances of conception, the preconception phase, reducing the risk of miscarriage so that once they do get pregnant, that it's more likely that they have a successful, healthy pregnancy. And then also there's even been studies showing that if a woman enters pregnancy with a vitamin D level of at least 40, her risk of preeclampsia is eliminated. And that's what some of the research that we're seeing come out now. So starting that pregnancy, and asthma is another disease because the lungs develop really early in pregnancy. So if you have enough vitamin D to support a healthy development of the lungs, you see a decreased risk, a higher decreased risk of asthma as well. So ensuring vitamin D sufficiency before, during, and after pregnancy is incredibly important. And especially, there's been a lot of research on breast cancer, but it certainly doesn't stop there.
Where do you see the biggest missed opportunities right now in public health or clinical practice?
So kind of just going back to that importance of vitamin D across the life cycle from preconception through pregnancy and baby and then into the later years of our lives, that importance of, we can say vitamin D is good for you, right? And sometimes that's where the message ends. And it ends in somebody just going out and buying a vitamin D supplement and taking it blindly. And the main message, the biggest missed opportunity is in what do you do with that information? And that is that key concept of testing to make sure that you're getting enough vitamin D, right? You cannot assume, like your doctor says you're low, and so he says go out and get more sunshine. You can't assume that you're getting enough sunshine to repair that low vitamin D level. You have to measure, you have to test to make sure that you're getting enough. And not only that, you have to retest to make sure that the dose that you start with is the correct dose for you to be maintaining a healthy vitamin D level. In fact, in our study, we found that at first test, about 50% of participants who tested were below that 40 nanograms per milliliter. And then they took their dose and then they retested. And at retesting, 1/3 of them were still below that 40 nanograms per milliliter. So 1/3 of them were still not taking enough vitamin D to be in that 40 to 60 range. And that's why you can't just guess. You can't just take a dose and think that it's enough. So in terms of clinical practice, Grassroots Health has created a protocol. It's a very simple protocol that can be used, and it is used in several hospital settings and clinics, and we've seen phenomenal results when this protocol is used. And it's simply to assess and educate an individual about what their unique risk factors are. Testing to test the baseline level. What is their current vitamin D level? Using our vitamin D calculator or some other weight-based calculator to determine a dose that could be appropriate for them, and then taking that dose for at least 2 to 3 months. We recommend retesting after 3 to 6 months because it takes a little while for your vitamin D level to adjust to that dose. And then follow up testing the blood level again to make sure that that dose is helping them to achieve their target level. And if not, you repeat. Everything from testing to correct dosing to education and really helping others understand their individual risk factors, both for vitamin D deficiency and also how vitamin D might be benefiting them personally. From everything from autoimmune diseases, which there's a lot of research now showing autoimmune diseases are very, very closely affected by vitamin D. And pregnant women, especially important as we've talked about here, just doing that protocol and educating within clinical practice, I think is really, really key and needs to be a big focus coming in these new few years.
Are there any current or upcoming Grassroots Health projects you're especially excited about?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, this last fall, Grassroots Health had a team of 12 individuals, I think. We went to Washington, D.C., our capital here, and we advocated for our vitamin D and maternal health initiative. So really our focus has been working at every level, everything from policy so that we can make some changes at the policy level, to working with practitioners and to working with the individuals. So yes, we went to our capital and met with our policymakers and our representatives and discussed vitamin D with them. We created some really nice handouts. I've got a brochure that we talked about earlier today that I'd love to share. That's basic information for individuals and practitioners. We're also working on a CEU, an online CEU course for nurses and dietitians. We have one right now for just a general vitamin D course, but then we're going to be working on one for maternal health as well. And so, yeah, we've got a lot of current and upcoming projects, not just on improving women's health, but on vitamin D for every aspect of disease. And Grassroots Health just started a bi-weekly vitamin D study hour as well, and that's when we have a vitamin D scientist come on and we discuss some of their research and opened it up for question and answer, and that's been a lot of fun to do, and it's been well received.
If there was one message you wish every woman of childbearing age knew about vitamin D, what would that be?
One thing, I failed to mention is the safety of vitamin D. Even during pregnancy. With the randomized controlled trials that Drs. Hollis and Wagner ran, they were giving their pregnant women 4,400 IU of vitamin D a day. There's been other studies that have given 5,000, 6,000 IU of vitamin D a day, and some giving higher doses for loading doses. And the safety profile there's been zero evidence of any harm or toxicity at those intakes during pregnancy or even not during pregnancy. And so I don't want anybody to be afraid of taking vitamin D, especially if you're measuring your level and you're staying on top of that. If your level stays below 100, you're perfectly fine. You don't see any toxicity until around levels of closer to 200 nanograms per milliliter. Vitamin D is a very safe nutrient to take. And then there's also other pieces of advice that I would give to anybody, right? We're all responsible for our own. It's our job to make choices for our body when we're pregnant for our baby as well. And those choices can affect the entire lifespan of our baby. And vitamin D is one of those very easy and inexpensive and safe ways that we can improve not just our own health during our pregnancy, but also the health of our baby once they're born. And then making sure they continue to get vitamin D as they grow. Make sure you're getting enough if you're breastfeeding, your baby's going to be getting enough through your breast milk. Once they start eating their own foods, get them used to taking a vitamin. And then as they grow into teenagers, understanding that their growth indicates a higher need for a little more vitamin D. So staying on top of your kids as they grow into teenagers and adults and making sure that they're getting enough vitamin D, omega-3s, and all of the important co-nutrients. Vitamin D doesn't work on its own. Magnesium is important. Other nutrients are important. So just, being a good mom, being a good individual, understanding that your actions translate into your health and your happiness and your babies as well. That's, I think the most important message. Because if you don't have that motivation, then you're not going to stick with those healthy habits.
Thank you, Jen.
Of course, it's my pleasure. It's been a good time talking about vitamin D with you.
Vitamin D is safe, accessible, and deeply connected to both maternal and lifelong child health, especially when we stay informed and monitor our levels. Research also shows that vitamin D remains important long after pregnancy. Adequate levels are linked to a lower risk of breast cancer and better long-term women's health. Testing, sunlight, and healthy nutrient levels truly matter, and small choices can shape generations. Once again, thank you. Thank you, Jen and the Grassroots Health team, for all your work and for sharing this knowledge with us.